I coach my students to treat the interview like a job interview. I mean, you're applying for a specific position.
Mhm.
Position is, being a student in the United States with a specific goal in mind as it pertains to your program of study, right? And so you need to think about, what are your goals? What are your ideal, and that means like, what is your ideal role when you come back to your country? Home ties plays a big role in the students being convincingly or have a plan, of how
Yes.
they're going to contribute to their country through that career that they have chosen.
Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. Today we have an important discussion about study abroad visa application with one of the key stakeholders who have been contributing to international education in the US from Park University, Kevin Vicker. And Kevin is the Associate Vice President of International Education at Park University. He has been directly involved in recruiting, guiding, coaching, and helping international students, particularly from Africa and elsewhere. But he spent most of his time with international students from Africa. So he has a lot of experience and context with African people when it comes to how visa decisions are made, how students should prepare for visas, how they should put in and prepare for the application, whether you are applying to Park University or other schools in the US. Kevin is the right resource. And I'm glad that he could spare some time to join us today. Kevin, thank you and thanks for being here.
Alfred, it's a pleasure being here. Thanks for having me.
Yes. I know you have a lot of experience when it comes to dealing with international students, particularly visa applications. And for the past 8 to 12 months, there have been a lot of issues, a lot of affairs, a lot of discussion on visas, on appointments, on immigration in the US in general that have impact on visa applications. So I want us to start from there and have a discussion on how should students prepare for visas these days. Things have changed, and I want to hear your own experiences guiding students for the past 8 months in this new administration. What should we
Sure.
be aware of?
Sure. Yeah, I think there's a couple main factors that we've seen change and that students should be aware of. The biggest single factor is planning more in advance, I think, for your visa process and appointment.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a couple of key factors to that. One key factor we're seeing is that, based on the guidance with the current administration, students must attend the visa appointment in their home country
Yes.
unless they have residency based elsewhere in another country. So that's a big change because previously students were going to many different countries to get a visa appointment outside their home country. So unless they have residency in another country, they need to go to their home country, which then leads to the second point is that, there's a backlog of appointments, right? So students are finding it more challenging to get a visa appointment and, need to plan further in advance for their studies. So for example, right now they should be planning to apply for fall, August intake because that's really the next realistic time they could possibly see a visa appointment. Sometimes when you have, we're searching for appointments, you'll see that, there's not an appointment for maybe 6 to 9 months or even more than that. But there are random appointments coming available. So they need to be diligent in looking as much as possible for those appointments to become available. And so that's a one issue that we're seeing that's created the backlog, that's created a situation where students need to plan in advance. Now, I will say that in terms of the visa interview itself, the same basic questions are being asked.
Thanks. Yeah.
Why do you want to study? What are you going to do in the US? What do you want to study? Why do you want to study this? And what is your financial support? Who is your sponsor? So, in that regard, we haven't seen a whole lot of changes on the questions being asked. One could argue that potentially they're being stricter on the process of making sure the students have answered all those questions a specific manner to their career, specific manner to their sponsor and what their sponsor does for a living and what kind of resources they have. And then, of course, there's the vetting process of the social media
Media. Yeah.
that will take after, in most cases, after they have the initial appointment. But we haven't had any issues specifically, in terms of that being a barrier per se. but they are being very, strict, you could say, on the vetting process in terms of the interview and things of that nature. I will say students are getting visas though. I mean, I've had students getting visas, but the ones that are getting those visas are very prepared, very well, have done a lot of homework, have done their research, are friendly to the visa officer as well. They're not just canned answers that are memorized, but they're very providing a lot of detail.
Yeah.
They're very friendly. They're talking through their career and talking through their goals. So those are some of the major changes that we've seen and continue to see across the continent.
So thank you. You brought a very key issue that I love, that most of the students you've seen get their visas are people who are really prepared and
Mhm.
who are not going there with generic or memorized answers. We have been doing this YouTube for the past 5 years. And sometimes when you are like in this conversation, you may give a sample answer to a potential question that is being asked. And you are giving this answer without any context because it is not personalized. Now, we've seen that most students watch videos like this and try to copy answers that you give or you suggest or you try to help them understand the process. And 5 or 6 people go to the interview and they are giving the same answers. So when you talk about preparation and you talk about memorization, how do you mean and what do you, in your experience, how should students prepare in order to be authentic, to be genuine, and to sound personal?
So, I coach my students to treat the interview like a job interview. I mean, you're applying for a specific position.
Mhm.
Position is, being a student in the United States with a specific goal in mind as it pertains to your program of study, right? And so you need to think about, what are your goals? What are your ideal, and that means like, what is your ideal role when you come back to your country? Home ties plays a big role in the students being convincingly or have a plan, of how
Yes.
they're going to contribute to their country through that career that they've chosen.
Mhm.
And that's different for everybody, right? So if you're in healthcare, it's, public health, how are you going to contribute? What's a main problem that you see how are you going to fix that? And is that, a realistic situation for you? Maybe you have experience already working in that industry, right? So you should design your answer accordingly. And so this is very important. You need to know about the school. You need to know about the program. All those things are important. But yeah, you need to start with, the career goal. You know, it's a job interview. Essentially, your job is to become a student in the United States
Yeah.
and use that knowledge, use that experience to benefit your country. So I think that's a key point that I've seen the interviewers hone in on.
Mhm.
Do they have the connection? Is it feasible? And so again, that's going to be different for every situation, every
Mhm.
student, depending on their career interest
Yeah.
and what they're wanting to accomplish.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's very true. And one of the key thing, Kevin, is that when we go for the interview, the visa interview is very short.
Hmm. That's
And
right.
the visa officer asks you the first question. And in the first question, that might be the only question the visa officer will ask. Or that might be the based on how you answer, there will be a follow-up question. So if you're not able to position yourself well, and I like the way you talk about it, connecting it as coming to the US as a job to come and study. Your job is to study. So how is that going to help you be who you are? And I've
Mhm.
realized that most students do well. They watch videos like we are talking about, but they
Mhm.
don't do well to research more about their schools and know particularly why Park University, for example, is a fit for them. And I
Correct.
think that's a huge part in the visa interview discussion. People say that visa officers decide the number of visas they are going to issue in a day. And if they reach that number, perhaps you will not get a visa. Do you share in those ideas, in your own experience? How do you think the visa officers work? What are they looking out for? You talk about the expectations of students and how students should prepare. But in your own experience, how do you think the visa officers think? I know you have not been a visa officer before, but at least you know the
Right.
rules, you know
I
the
know.
requirements. So, what are they looking out for when students enters the interview room to get their interview done?
Yeah, no, I think like I said, they're looking for specifics. They're looking for someone, they're professional, they're prepared. I think that they, my, I have no evidence or have no reason to believe that they have a specific, number or quota, but they're being evaluated by, you know, others in the embassy. They're, working with the process and so on and so forth. So, you know, the approval numbers and whether they approve as many or not. I mean, they're going to be looking at those students closely, and so those officers are under, being evaluated too for the students they approve.
Yeah.
So I think that's important. If a visa officer is going to approve 5 students in a row without really much investigation or whatnot, obviously that's going to be an issue, right? At a higher level. So I think they're really, you know, being very diligent. The vetting is strong, so they're not going to spend time on an applicant if they don't feel like it's worth their time to vet all that social media, all
Yeah.
those handles, because it's more time and process for them to do that. So I think, that's something that you think about. They really think about is because they're not going to take that extra step unless they're, reasonably convinced that the student's a viable student
Yeah.
and they have the focus and the resources to be successful and to be a student and benefit their country as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I have two more questions on visas, then we go to school application. How important do you think that the DS 160 form plays a role in visa approval or denial in your own experience? Because I've seen most people who don't fill the DS 160 themselves. They give it to agents and the agent tell them what to put on or put on the form. I talked to a lady who was denied. She came to us, she emailed us, we talked to her, and apparently the agent filled the form that she's married, even though she was not married. And according to the agent, that will prove ties to home. And now she's denied, and she want to go back saying that, no, I'm not married. I made a mistake. And marriage is not something you can just sit down and say, I made a mistake overnight and correct it.
No.
Obviously, the visa officer will know there is something. So
Sure.
I want to know your own thought about how important is the DS 160 form, and how should students pay attention or take that into consideration when they are filling or getting their visas, getting ready for their visas.
Yeah, and that absolutely important. I mean, it speaks to the student's attention to detail, and visa officers know that this is a situation where, sometimes students will pay agencies to fill out the forms for them, right? So they're aware of all those things, and it's extremely important that the student is attentive to the details on that form and that that information is accurate. And of course, it's not the end all be all to the application, but it does provide the foundation, just like a job interview. If your CV or your application for a job does not seem accurate, then you're not going to get an interview for that job. So, or a chance at that job. So it's the same kind of thing. I mean, in terms of the process, you need to make sure that those things are accurate. You need to do it, take ownership. I think that's the main thing is sometimes students, they rely on agencies. Agencies provide resources for them, but they're dependent on those agencies. And that's just not good because it's going to lead to issues that will lead to a denial if the student's too dependent upon the agency to do the process for them. They have to take ownership of their process, and they have to take ownership of their status and be aware of everything. So those are all things that we work with students on a daily basis. And every student we admit, we provide opportunity for mock interview, for preparation for the interview within our
Good.
staff here.
Yeah.
And we have a regional representative in Africa as well for representing us in Ghana. So altogether, we offer all those resources here for students before they go for the interview.
Yeah. I think Park University, honestly, is one of the few institutions that is so much concerned about international students and their welfare. Like right from the start of the process, somebody is with you and you are going through, like even for visa. I remember when I got admitted and I was coming to school, I didn't have anyone to coach me. But for Park, if you are coming through Park, there's an interview session. You don't have to pay someone to do it. And these are people who have also done it and they know what they are doing. So that's something I really love and I appreciate from what you are doing. And and it's great. So my last question on visa is about funding. Most people, I think there's a genuine concern about going to the visa interview with no funding. Sometimes people go with loans. I will not mention any specific loan agency, with loans, and others go with a bank statement, ultimately or mostly either an uncle or an auntie. That is very common in our context. So people go to the visa interview room and they are being sponsored by uncle. In a day, if you have 10 people going for the interview, about 6 of them are uncle or auntie sponsored. And
Right.
there's a concern. Recently, somebody emailed me and asked me if the mere fact that she is going with an uncle will be a denier. And I was trying to help her understand the entire process, not just one piece on funding. So, how do you think students should position themselves in defending or arguing about their funding status? Assuming they didn't get full funding, of course, not everybody get full funding, but they have the means to support themselves, but they are being sponsored with a bank statement. Usually, visa officers don't even check this bank statement. So, how should we prepare if we don't have funding or we don't have money from the schools, but from elsewhere and applying for a visa?
Yeah, and it's very accurate. In terms of the responses, students are telling us this that the officers, I won't say, I mean, the focus on it in the interview is on the response of the student
Yes.
and their ability to convince the visa officer. For the funding, absolutely, we 100% encourage the funding to be from an immediate relative, a parent, a sibling, something that can be more directly tied to the student's story. If it is outside, if it's not a parent or an uncle or aunt, you gotta be convincing on why they're funding your education and, how have they supported you. In addition to that, you need to know what job they have, how many, I had students talk about how many acres they own, how many heads of cattle they have.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, just the level of detail that you need to know. So to demonstrate that the sponsor knows you and is in relationship with you and is bought into the situation or bought into like your dreams and your education. So obviously the immediate family is better, but at any rate, it's easier to convince them on the immediate family, harder on others, right? We've had some students, they delve into how many, how many kids do they have? If they have, six
Yeah.
kids, but then you're the sixth kid, how are they gonna fund you?
Mm-hmm.
And after they've funded three or four other
Yes.
kids, right? Oh, there's situations like that, and also at play. But so the visa approvals we've seen are people that have communicated and proven those types of things. That you should have direct documentation to back up what you're saying. Regarding the sponsors.
So I want us to zoom into admissions. I will ask, sometimes when we are doing application, we think as students and we prepare our application based on the requirements we see on the website, the engagement and all that. But you as an admission, part of admission team, what do you look out for? Uh, are there things that you are allowed to share in this for students to
Sure.
prepare? What do you look out for? Could you walk us through some of the things you look out for in the admission decision and how that should prepare students, especially when it's come to funding? Of course, there are some school students who are very good. They may get admission, but they may not get funding because funding is more competitive. So,
Yep.
what do you look out for when you are reviewing a student application, and how should that inform the way students apply for schools?
Yeah, I mean, and I think a few different things come to mind. Number one, we're looking for authenticity in the applicant, right?
Mm.
So, we're looking closely at the transcripts, the finances. There are cases of fraud out there, right?
Wow.
And we take that very seriously. And so there'll be times when we're calling, contacting banks directly around, the
You
world
do
and getting,
that?
yeah. If we
Oh.
have a question about the finances, we will do that and to verify the funds. And so that's one thing. Every student, as part of the application process, fills out an essay of why Park, in the scholarship portion. So obviously, we're looking for something genuine to the student's journey, not something that can be just created by AI. as an example. And so that's a key part of it. And then, you know, obviously we have baseline, academic standards and things of that nature, but we are looking for students that are focused in what they're trying to do. And, we encourage, as I said, we encourage everyone to interact with the mission staff so that they can prepare well for their interviews because, we can do our part, but the student has
Yeah.
to take ownership of it. So,
Yeah.
typically we're, trying to turn around an application in about, a couple weeks if ideally, but that's kind of how we structure it. We do work with our academic departments at the graduate level, to make sure that they are on the same page of, what they're looking for in applicants. But,
Yeah.
you know, our requirements are reasonable, but we're looking for, genuine applicants that have, the resources necessary, not just probably meeting the minimum, but exceeding the minimum requirements in terms of their finances as well. But we do have some, reasonable scholarships available as part of that process. So
Yeah.
that's kind of a little bit how we function.
So, Kevin, you talked about authenticity and genuine applicant. I want us to zoom in a little bit on that. When you say authenticity, what do you mean, and how do you determine authenticity? Is it from the essays, or from the recommendations, or from the CVs? Can you talk briefly on that before we move to the next one?
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, we're looking at we're looking at transcripts that are, overall we're do assess for fraud, in terms of the process in general.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's one piece of it. Bank statement transcripts, we have a process for assessing that. I mean,
So,
the other part would be,
mhm,
okay, on their essays, their for graduate statements of purpose, for undergrad, their scholarship essay, or both their scholarship essay,
mhm.
in terms of like, does it match their CV? Does it, is it just kind of
Surface area.
copied from somewhere or
Yes.
AI generated,
Yeah.
but is it just
Plagiarism.
their
Yeah.
story? Yep. And so that's the other part of kind of the personal authenticity that
Yeah.
we're evaluating.
Mm.
Mhm.
Thank you. And I think for me, I've always said this on the channel that one of the key things I've seen most African students fail to do is being authentic. We don't know how to be authentic, how to be ourselves. Because when somebody does something and it's work, we always want to copy the person. So for a long time, Paul and I we stopped sharing our SOPs because we realized that I shared my SOP I used for my Yale application with students. And I realized that students were copying my lines. They were, even though like it's like they put the SOP down and they uproot any
Yep.
and plants. And
Yep.
they don't allow themselves because every student have a unique story. I told one student that when I was coming to Yale, my undergrad, I didn't perform so well. But there was a reason for that. So I wrote a letter and explained why I didn't perform in my undergrad. And I believe the admission committee really, really appreciated that opportunity for them to know that aspect of my life. And I didn't just explain to give excuses, but to show them what I have
Yes.
learned from that experience and how that experience have prepared me for graduate education. So I think for most of our people, they don't know how to be authentic. You may come from
Yeah.
a farming community, you may come from wherever. That experience is rich, it is unique. And perhaps, Kevin, when you are reading essays, it is hard to see a student who says, I grew up in a farmland. And assuming you see that essay, that speak directly to the students and why they want to make the world a better, not for themselves, but for their communities and their nation. It sparks the interest of the admission committee. So I love that so much.
Yeah.
Now,
That's
yeah. Let me talk about fraud. Recently, there have been a lot of issues about transcript fraud. We have about, I think I've read about a news where a Ghanaian had been jailed or seen in prison here in the US because of fraud that the school detected in the transcript. Apparently, according to the student, it's an agent who uploaded a transcript. And the agent is also now denying that, no, I don't know, I don't have anything to do with it. So I want you to talk more about it in your own experience. How how have you seen students trying to forge their way out, or trying to, whether knowingly or unknowingly, get into the trap of fraud? And how do you handle such issues when you see it?
Yeah. So, I mean, as I said before, and I love to just to back up, I love your point about being like admitting that your struggles, right? It's really good, really, really good if you know, just admit that, hey, I didn't do well academically. And schools love that kind of genuineness and not trying to paint, you know, the perfect picture. So
Yes.
that's great. I really commend you for that, and that's really great. In terms of the fraud piece, so you know, we are obviously assessing, you know, all the different tools of assessing, you know, bank statements and transcripts and things. So our immediate verification process will be to reach out directly to the school and or bank.
Yeah.
We detect that there might be fraud involved. Okay. Now here's what sometimes happens, especially with the bank statements is, you know, if they say it's not genuine or if it's not authentic, then we'll go to the student and the student will say, oh, you know, the agency gave me the bank statement, or more likely the this family member did it for me, and they don't know
Yeah.
because this family member gave it to them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know, okay, again, it goes back to that ownership piece.
Yes, you
You know,
talked about. Yeah.
your sponsor may be doing something, but at the end of the day,
You have to
your
own it.
application represents you,
You.
not you're the primary, you know, representative for yourself, not your family member who's sponsoring, not the agency, not whoever, you know, like, and so
Yeah.
I think that's, you know, then they to try to put that on there. So, you know, we tend to be very strict with that and not try to, you know, go around and mess back and forth with that. I mean, in terms of it's pretty much a straight up denial for us in that scenario because we can't be doing that kind of thing. And, you know, that's our job to make sure the genuine students are going to through the process into the embassy. So, but I think, again, yeah, can't expect, and sometimes it's unexpected. You know, we have, you know, people that you would maybe not, maybe students are genuine in that, and, you know, maybe they were, you know, given something that they didn't know about and things of that, but they can verify those things, you know, they should verify those things before submitting the application and
Yeah.
not after. So,
Yeah. I always tell students that whether you're applying to school or visa, there is a checkbox that asks you, did you do this application yourself? Do you
mhm.
agree to the following terms, stating that everything you submit is genuine? So even
Yep.
if whatever you submit or you submitted wasn't genuine, you have already agreed to that disclaimer, agreeing that they are genuine. So we must really,
And
really,
I think,
yeah,
and I think sometimes students don't understand the seriousness of that.
yeah,
You know, it's just kind of maybe common in, you know, for some
yeah,
people, but from the university side, I mean, it's very serious,
yeah.
you know, legal issue. So, you know, I think students just need to understand that
Yeah.
from the school's perspective, it's a very serious matter. So,
Yeah. And for whoever is watching, I think this demands stressing that you pay attention to whatever you are submitting, even your CV and all that. Make sure that you are being authentic, you are being genuine, because you may go through the process, assuming going through the process, becoming a PhD, and later your school back up and say your transcript was fake. So they are withdrawing all your certificate and you are being persecuted. That is not something that everybody want to put themselves in. Kevin, let's talk briefly about recommendation letters. Do you see fraud, or do you see some aspect of fraud in recommendation, like students trying to write their own recommendation letters or misrepresenting their professors? And how does that also affect their application?
so I can speak from Park's perspective.
Yeah.
We do not require recommendation letters for the application process.
Oh,
We genuinely, I mean, I know other schools do
mm-hmm.
that still, but in my experience, they're helpful potentially for maybe in a job situation with the recommendation, you know, that's a
Yeah.
different situation. But for the admission processes, we tend to find students are just getting the same letters, you
Mm-hmm.
know, the
Yes.
faculty,
Yes.
as you know, have in Ghana, Kenya, other places that, you know, there's hundreds of students, right?
Students.
And so they just
Professors don't
using
have
the
time.
same template, their same template,
Yeah.
and giving it to the student. And that's not the student's fault because
Yeah.
that's what they're getting right from from the faculty member.
Yeah.
So generally speaking, we don't find those to be too helpful
You are right.
in the application process. We find the statement of purpose, the CV, those other kinds of documents to
Yeah.
be more helpful than
Yeah.
the recommendation letters. Obviously, other schools are different in that. So, I think my recommendation again would be to seek out faculty that you know very well, that you've done research with, that you actually worked for,
Yeah.
or something deeper than just
Yeah.
taking the class.
Yeah.
Okay. Where there's actually a real relationship there that they
Yeah.
can actually write a letter that's specific to your story, to
Mhm.
your situation, and not just the template that they've used for, 70
Yeah.
other students that have asked for a recommendation letter. Well, that would be my
Yeah.
recommendation for
Yeah.
those that need to submit
Yeah.
those.
Kevin, you are right. I remember when I was in UCC, we were about 257 students in the Become class. And sometimes, no matter how hard you try, you don't catch the attention of the professor because it is not the professor's fault. And they have papers to mark, they have articles to write. You know the work in this field as professors. So it is hard sometimes. And I like the point you are making because UCC, for example, we had the departmental recommendation where there's a template. They insert your name, your index number, and they give it to you. And there's that where when you have personal relationship with professors, they will write for you. I was a course rep, so that was what helped me because I was more or less like a rep in the class. So the professor that I was helping as a course rep knew me, and she wrote a very good recommendation for me. So I like that you brought it up so that if you really want to study abroad, especially for those who are yet to start a process, who are already in school and thinking that after they are done with their undergraduate or after they are done with their high school, they are interested in studying abroad, then they should make intentional effort to connect with professors or advisors to help them in this regard. Kevin, I have two questions, then I think we can bring this interview to an end. The first question is AI and essays. I think the invention of AI has brought a lot of positive transformation in writing, in knowledge, and in education. However, it also has really its implication in authenticity, on hard work, and on whatever. So, in your experience, when you are reviewing application, how do you consider AI in the process? Do you have? I know you mentioned it. That make me understand that Park has zero tolerance for AI. But I want you to take us through briefly. How do you interact with students with regards to AI, and what is your advice on how students can ethically use AI in whatever form, whether it is their school application or a resource?
Yeah. So for the application process itself, on the statements of purpose, we are looking, of course, we consider the AI checkers that, are common as a baseline, but deeper than that, we are looking at the actual specific, wording and the things used by the student, right? Is the wording and is the story narrative being told that's specific to the student, in a way that's genuine, again,
Yeah,
not just kind of regurgitated, I
yeah,
guess you could say. So
yeah,
this is the main thing with the statements of purpose that I recommend. Obviously, the best way to do it is just to write it without any AI assistance. Obviously, we know there's grammar checker and things that, are like more just spell check and stuff like that related issues. And so that's not as much of a concern for us, but it's just mainly, is it telling the narrative of the student?
yeah.
And that's a key part.
Wow.
Okay. So the other part would be the school part, right? So the way we tell AI, it has a lot of useful. I use AI to do research. It has great capabilities to find information quickly, efficiently, but you need to treat it as if it is the old library, right?
Yes,
You
with a
go
lot
it's
of garbage.
just the faster version of it, right? So
Yes.
you're just getting the resources, you're verifying where the resources come from, and verifying the links that AI is giving you to those resources. And so that's the way we coach students to use it. And then of course in the writing to do it on their own unless prompted by the professor otherwise. And then, you know, that's of course that's the way you have to approach it and not become dependent upon using the different checkers because the faculty can tell again the education is deeper than just a test, right?
Yeah.
It's again the relationship, the faculty with the faculty that knows that you're turning in genuine work, which leads to a genuine grade, which
Mm-hmm.
beyond the grade leads to a relationship that will happen that a faculty member will recommend you for that first job, will
Yeah.
recommend that
Age.
position,
Yeah.
right? And so students need to think beyond just the grade. They need to think greater, right? It's about learning. It's about growing. It's about developing yourself and developing those relationships for your career growth. So
Yeah.
when your focus is there, I think the AI discussion becomes clearer to you and not just trying to get through something for the sake of it.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's really powerful. The way we understand what education or academics should be, sometimes there's tendency, especially those of us who grew up in Africa, to get the grades. Like, I want the A, and that should matter now. But as you said, beyond that, I have really benefited from relationship with my professors. After school, when I was looking for jobs, they wrote recommendations for me. Some of the professors even sent me links for jobs that I can apply because of the relationship. And obviously that relationship comes from class engagement papers and the ability for them to trust me to even take their time to search for something and send it to me. It's all about building trust and relationships. So that's
Right.
impactful. So
100%.
the last probably question before I allow you, I know you have a lot of things doing, Kevin, is that so most schools, every schools and park is included, have minimum requirements like GPA. So assuming your GPA requirement is, let's say, 3.0 or 2.7, but I have a lower GPA. However, I have a very good professional career, and I am applying to, let's say, business administration. I've worked in the banking industry for a long time. I'm interested in analytics and all that. How does the admission review committee work, especially for your school? Because I know there are some schools that are, if you don't meet the minimum GPA requirement, they don't even go ahead to review your essays or your CVs to know what you have. So can you tell us, as students, people who are watching, are interested in PAC, who might not specifically qualify with regards to GPA? Because as I said, when I was in school, I had an issue that took my focus off, not necessarily because I was a bad student, but because socioeconomic situation affected my academic performance. So how do PAC review admissions with regards to requirements?
So yeah, if we do have someone that meets below a GPA requirement, for example, if they are an equivalent of 2.3 and they need a 2.75, or a 2.5 and they need 2.75 to be admission, we will take a look at that student and sometimes request a low GPA statement. Then that is reviewed by our team and then the graduate coordinator as well
Mhm.
at the graduate level. So we do our best, and sometimes, be honest, we'll just interview the student
Yeah.
most commonly now, and just say, okay, we want to talk to you, and we want you to tell us about your career goals and tell us about your process of how you found out about us and kind of about yourself, and then we'll take it from there as well. So that's becoming more common for us because we genuinely want to hear from the students and find out about what's going on with them and why maybe they've struggled in the past and how, their experience has informed their current situation.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the way we operate. Again, it goes back to we want to provide access for students. We want students to be successful. We don't want to just issue documents for the sake of that. And then they're not ready then they're not going to get a
Yeah.
visa anyways.
Yeah.
So doesn't help anybody
Yeah.
in the process. So that's our focus.
Yeah. Kevin, tell me, I know PAC is doing a lot of connection in Africa. You have so many representatives, you do recruitment and all that. Why do you think students should consider PAC? There are a lot of African students. We got to know you through some of the students because of our videos. So can you show us, or can you tell us some of the things that PAC offers and how PAC is a good place for international students? And I know PAC is a good place, but if somebody is watching, why do you think they should consider PAC University?
Sure. So I think what we offer here is a long history of welcoming international students to giving
Obviously.
access to international students through small classes, through personalized attention. We have 500 international students here from more than 60 countries currently.
Wow.
So not only that, but then at a more affordable price that they find in other places.
Yes.
That also offer maybe small classes and such. And, I think we've proven that we take care of our students, that we try to do our best for our students and provide them again as many opportunities as we can for their growth. And in the Kansas City area here, especially. And it's a great place to be where, we have a beautiful environment, but we have access to the city that, one of our cities hosting the World Cup this coming summer. So we're excited about that coming.
That's your policy for international students at Park.
Yeah. So
I have
it's,
thinking about going to Toronto because Toronto is closer to Rochester, the nearest place I could get. So I wish
yeah.
I was there. That would have been a yeah.
No, absolutely. So there's a lot of opportunities, and that's why students find us attractive through the years and why they continue to do so today.
Yeah. Thank you. And finally, do you require an application fee? And what will be your last word for students who are planning to apply to Park or other schools from Africa?
Yeah, we do have an application fee of $75, but if they go through a process through contacting us directly, we can consider waiving that fee. But at the same time, we want to make sure the students are viable financially
Hmm?
before we start the process
Yeah.
because we don't, want to kind of guide people to spend time, energy, and money if it's not realistic for them.
Yeah.
So they can reach out to me directly on that.
Yeah, I will leave your details in the video description section so that student can have access to that. Do you have any final words, any advice to students going for visas or preparing the applications and all that?
Yeah.
Any encouragement?
I mean, just prepare and take the mock interviews as many as you can with people. You have all you can do is you can control what you can control.
Yes.
Okay. And that's what I recommend to students is just to take the time and prepare as much as they can. And at the end of the day, the visa officer is going to make the decision. But I always say, that, it's kind of like in sports, you don't want to leave anything there on the pitch, right? You want to give everything you have. And so that at the end of the day, there was nothing that was left out in the visa officer's mind that you wish you would have said or you wish you would have provided along those lines. So I think
Yeah.
that's the main advice I have. Take advantage of the resources because you'd be surprised how many students don't take advantage of some of those resources and they don't take those steps. They don't do the mock interviews. They don't necessarily do what they need to do to, have the optimum success. So
Yeah. I've always tell students to be confident because you've put in a lot
yes.
of work. It's been a lot of the application process usually take a year and you've done all this, paid the application fee, gone through the process, done the mock interview. And at the interview room, you have only 1 minute to 2 minutes to
Yes.
give answers. You don't freeze, you don't throw everything away, you don't get confused, and you don't say I was afraid. You try as much as you can to give out your best. And I know if
I
you,
think
go ahead.
no, yeah, absolutely. Be confident in who you are. And you're not defined by one interview.
Yes.
Your life, who you are as a person is not defined by, 1 minute of someone's evaluation of you.
Yeah.
It's, and so just go in there, be confident, be friendly. And, for human beings that have a tough job and a lot of work to do, many applicants, many papers to process and all those things is a tough job. So, try to be friendly, be upbeat. Sometimes students, they get so, focused that they get so serious and then it's, I don't know.
They
just
freeze
maintain,
like they go
yeah,
into the
maintain a
freezing.
level of understanding that
Yeah.
these are human beings that are trying to do the best they can.
Yeah.
So.